I'm in the church in Italy, and the walls are quite warm compared to the ones in Atterbury. I feel quite good here. So I will talk about a few things. One is the waggle dance of bees, put in the context of general theory, and another is general theory. So I have been looking at compositional game theory, which attempts to use category theory to develop compositional games so that you can plug one into another that's scale. And scale seems to be important in everything, in Leibniz's ideas of worlds within worlds, which would go from the brainoid to individual brains, social brains, and axons within it, and dendrites within it, and neurons within it, and cells within those cells of dopamine itself. What is dopamine? It forms into possibly spin glasses of dopamine. Inside the dopamine would be individual chemicals which would perhaps have worlds of atoms. Atoms would form stable black holes basically, and things get out of that black hole through the nucleus of the quarks, which is structured in threes, and call them threes. And so it may be possible for the love of the cosmos to actually erupt from the centre of all atoms in the progress of time, in the surreal numbers which are non-Archimedean field. That means things are not repeated. Things come up to being in what are recursive functions, which seem to determine number theory's J modular forms, which are behind while this rather false proof of Fermat's theorem. Fermat's theorem seems important in order to code triples, which pairs of triples of triples, which come down into quadratic equations after sleep or rest, after the excitement which is concentrated on a future point of compactly complex twistor spaces, which is the foundation of the Higgs boson, at the top of the universe, the material universe, which does in fact determine things like the mass of the electron. Now, perfectoids are important. They define a fine structure, generally across a particular topology of what they are called Hoover rings. They are very much connected to what we call rings or local rings on a topology with a metric. Now, if there's a metric there, and you actually define a non-commutative con-type spectral triple with a Dirac operator, and that will derive from the Waltonians that perfectoids are the centre of in their commutativity. And now all those perfectoid Waltonians have a certain singularity. That singularity is in a different step. And they're called from the original these ideas of technology, neurology, Cartesian problems, the aspects of empathy across those to defeat any solipsism, transcendental or empirical, and it forming a life world which can be expressed at least as ultrafilters over a morass on a surreal game. So the question I was just asked is whether the con triple is actually derived from something higher. The con triple requires a norm. Now, does that norm actually derive from a metric relating the fields, the perfectoid fields, to, iteratively speaking, to what are those topologies, non-house topologies? So these non-commutative geometries have a centre which would be the hyperbolic functions, which are in many ways a spectra in the physical world of commutative cornbodies which are missing classical, which are only almost commutative and elliptical in many ways. They converge quite easily. Oh, what is this? I don't know. So it is related to the question of the 6 yogas and the 6 curves in twistor space, determining through autofilters a particular self-referential fractal space, which is the model living of nature. Everything is nature, even the commuted parts of nature. However, in this returns to Naval's Victor, Reinhold, and Schelling of the turn of the 19th century in 1800. What we need to do is see how those norms are formed. Norms are formed with a particular spectral triple such that the squared is the multiplication of all squares. That's a specific geometrical relationship can derive that from the fulfillment, as if everything tends to everything else in a moment, which is the omega point of the world going from alpha. The omega point then thrusts down and upwards through the traces of the spirituality at that point, which are nearly trees of various forms, ultimate forms, separation forms of spirituality, into that point unified by gaining the X, which is thought. So yes, that's all stuff. Yeah. So computational gaining theory is not really very well written down. In 2016, Julian Hayes is altogether fudged, but rather squiffy mathematics. But and he missed the main point when you get to the top of the real numbers. You don't just percolate down. You do a Jensen coding. He missed that completely. Although he does define a monoid on the actual symmetric monoid orbital category. However, that in our terms is merely the formation of a new core model out of its segments. Those segments determined by the spin glass bases, which are basically one more than the one before it, all the ones before it. So what they do, they seem to define later on the idea of a lens. I'm not quite sure it was a lens, but it's a way to combine different elements of Mouse theory and core model theory together. And the idea of the abelian causal nature of these theories is that everything is connected to everything. If things were totally disconnected, then how would you say anything about them? The equality sign was simply not functioning anyway. So I suppose what is the relationship between what's it called these covalent acting as a covalence in these kind of categories of non-commutative geometries and topologies, that basically the equality sign is very much related internally to the equivalence sign in some way. And that may actually ultimately be related to the whole idea of shooting diamonds through various dimensional Mouse theories and killing them. And that may actually all be related to what I am proposing. I haven't checked it anyway whatsoever. In the idea of Stifel in the 16th century and different productions as families of quadratic equations, which I propose are coming quite directly from events in the Mouse structure, when new mice of a certain order is formed in what is termed in category theory as the infinity category, which one can see conceptually is the same in many ways as Bradley's rather unknown logic that dictate his appearance of Mouse. So yeah, that infinity point would be a point of convergence. That convergence occurs from starting from natural numbers and all the predicates on them that you can imagine in some method of imagination, which is merely the forming together through twistor transforms of bits and pieces that are already there, far starting from an empty set percolating into formative ideas of natural numbers with minimal predicates on them. Or those predicates are defining a fine structure when they are compared together, and in that higher fine structure, that higher model of natural numbers, you have lower ones of natural numbers. Now, what happens to all these processes is that somehow you get a set of auras, a non-commutativity. And why not? Because the path through the earliest William cardinals will in fact be non-commutative, because they can go up and down, because they're merely indexed by numbers, and that is a non-commutative set. And the first non-commutative set, whether left or right, and it holds from there on onwards a wooden above of wooden limit of woodness, which the core model theory stops.
So that's where the non-community comes from. And the non-community altogether is going up and down. That's a bit of a worry, bit of a local consideration of worries. None of them together. And you can ask higher up whether there's a diamond sequence actually relating them. And in that sense, the mouse that iterates past each branch will be fitted together in a normal way in a core model which is defined inductively. So the difference really is between pyramidal group points and null sets, and I think that is also a distinction between these two stifled arguments of the quadratic resonance, whether they are formed as two successors, being part of an infinite series of quadratic equations, or indeed of two consecutive ones, 1, 0, 1. If 1, 0, 1, the next undefinable one must actually be still on the right-hand side, still commutative, so it seems to work. One has to check that, although one sees that they do form different sequences altogether, and they may, in fact, be the entire duality of the world dualities, is not the world of opposites in any way, because the second type of quadratic equations are indeed non-symmetric. They only go one way, unlike the first two. So that would define asymmetry on the first octonium of three elements. That octonium is based on the E8 exterior Lie group, and it does actually allow partial differential equations. Now, Twistor's theory of a higher order is not about space-time, but about solving partial differential equations. That's obviously what happens. When you shoot the etheric body of the being, the self is formed through Quine's new foundation of elements, all the singularities. They are covered by ultrafilters, unless you have these subcompacts where they are missing, and that is the creation of all evil and all worry and all trauma, as the trauma is fixed by passing somehow automatically, but in many ways, well, in every possible way. Forcing the diamond sequence actually adds more things. They are shadows. You can force in different ways. The unique predicate of forcing is not actually unique. What you get is shadow ones. Each branch you go, the shadow one is actually different vibrations yourself. And all those vibrations should well be compatible, because at the end point of the entire cosmos, the infinity zero of the cosmos, where the natural numbers comparing against the natural numbers with different predicates until it leaves different fine structures, and crucially, Grekor's turbulence and ergodic theorem should hold. If I can check it, then that would form the point. That would make sure the entire universe is an obedient category. And in that sense, everything can be added in times. There is a ring structure and also a topological structure. Normally when one defines a topology and an algebra, they don't add up to anything of any use, really, because the kernel doesn't exist and you can't form into new things. But forming the category of category, the sheet of sheets of a particular type of Hoover function, which is a particular type of metric on the pre-topologies that are cumulatively arranged, just like the core models of one dimension of a two particular type of spinner, a two spinner, then they will in fact form like that. And so that will form. And then once you get to that available point, the natural numbers really represent themselves again, and forming a light with a capital L, where all things are unified through infinity categories and topoi. The question of topoi is, first of all, is it well founded in the sense that there is a beginning, the world, the abstract world, the real world is actually different from God's world in a certain sense, talking in his church, because people are well founded. They don't go around in wild pignesses. However, the God at the top may actually be the same as God below. In some minds, it's a fragment of mind, maybe imitation, but doesn't imitate completely, because God is the fulsomeness of essentially not the membership relationship, but in fact of the membership relationship in particular mouse ordering structures of higher logic. But indeed, is in fact a subset of that. We want to find a subset of classes, and the God is certainly class. And it's not a pre-tame forcing, it's a non-tame forcing. The fact is that in the J modular forms, you restrict the vertex operator algebras to having a finite interfaces, and that essentially is the difference between God and human beings. God is I always forget the name of these things, but God is the viewable series of infinite descents, and you cannot predict what's going to happen from the real world, and that is why the debate between Badiou and Deleuze was, in many ways, the idea of univocity, of God speaking the same voice to himself as it does to his subjects, and that is not actually true in this case. There is a subtle difference between preterm forcing and God forcing, and God forcing is completely under control as far as one can see from this place, and one cannot replace, it seems, the subject relationship of mereology of Butler and Whitehead with a membership. It doesn't make any sense. You can't seem to start another empty sense to continue. It just doesn't seem to work. I've tried very hard to work it doesn't work. One has to only consider the path through. Those paths through are quite nicely, actually, form a new type of cosmology on essentially the non-commutative arithmetic of ordinals. And as the traumas of the worlds are healed, they are created naturally by the creation of any world in any subset, and God must reflect out, and everything is determined completely. Although one doesn't know what one's virtuality is until the actuality is formed with the coding of the infinite gap morass. That is the structure of the world over the non-commutative perfectoid octonions along the real numbers of the ordinals, and the actuality stems from that point, which, as I said, is guaranteed, I believe, by the turbulence theorems as probably need to be extended, but they merely matter on Borel functions within a supers. And crucially, I believe that the first projected well-ordering, inaccessible from below, is also there as an indefinable projector. And the projector, when the world is lined up in its fullness, in God's sense of absolute reason or understanding, the understanding of the world, which is formed by mapping normal twisters in pairs to, in fact, the perfectoid, and the string, the SO32 string theory. This is so important in string theory, the master theory of string SO32. So that will form like that. Anyway, one needs these lenses, and the problem with the game theory that Jules Hedges and also people in Strathclyde did, they didn't define in terms of ultrafilters. They had some axioms saying what they were, and they were not clear what they were, and the axioms, I would imagine, if we trail through it, will basically be that the strategies are all ultrafilters, and the lenses are compatibilities between those ultrafilters, which the turbulence theory and the fine structure will show is always possible in Whitehead's sense that the world is concrescent being. Anything outside it, then it's the same being, isn't it? It can't be anything else, it must be identical. So it doesn't make any sense to say it's different to each other, because there's only one thing. I don't see how you can argue outside that thing and do the same thing, and not be exactly the same thing. I don't see, in that sense, why there should be multiple copies, because they're not degenerated by any sense of, any sense. Possible, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be there could be many gods of this sense falling into one, and then the many other. I don't know. I don't quite know at the moment. It seems all uniquely defined as everything is available in the bubbles of structure. Everything is available. I don't see why there should be a new universe of bubbles opposite this bubble, forming the structures into infinity. It seems there is a restriction on the number of imaginations you can form, and that imagination is basically the twisted transform, and it's unique. And also, when you apply Jensen coding or this twisted transform or the quantum geometric landsans, it is at least unique for each point. And then whether it's unique afterwards very much depends on whether one has a diamond sequence in that position. So the diamond sequence is very important, and square and morass is very important for the subcompact cardinals as well. So it's the relationship between those two. That is a relationship between all people, their relationships in their diamonds and squares and common apparatuses, not just of the normal core model theory, but in fact of the ultimate one of infinity gap morass. the diamonds there are, in fact, I believe, the same as the diamonds expressed in perfecto diamonds of higher order. The order there you discuss in Dobson's ideas is basically, I think, Infinity 1. They're not actually using that matrix algebra as much as they should do, escaping from black holes. They're only pushing through themselves without healing of the love of discosis that is there until the light of the capital L of Ficta is formed. And of course, the whole problem of meeting things is where on earth one's diamonds, and this could well be the relationship between the 1-1 undefinable and the 1-0-1 undefinable, as far as I can see with that duality in the first case. So that all matters. In the beginning, I suppose everything from the empty sets begins with primeval chaos. In some ways, it ends with primeval chaos, but it's primeval chaos absolutely infused with love as the physical universe essentially develops and then evaporates. That love I had seen in hospital. For I definitely saw the new form of Riemann hypothesis, which is dependent upon mass becoming iteratively on itself, replaced by the love of mammon, and back into the third order of aesthetics and prayer until it becomes non-law-like, because prayer is not law-like. And so the non-law-like sequences of Brouwer are coming into play, and also his fan theories and things like that. His fan theories, it seemed trivial and stupid, but in the non-community case, they are not stupid at all. But he wasn't considering that for some odd reason, and only considered stationary tower forcings over rather boring things like inaccessibles, and that's only available to covalent functions within space-time or within the electromagnetic strong and weak forces. And weak forces is the one of prayer when they come together in the Hydra. And it is seen, I believe, that madness can start when the hyperbolic geometry of antithesis space, when all the cobalial spaces are formed, actually is the synapse of serotonin going into axons and changing. But the fact is that the reuptake may be too much in it is in fact the third and fourth moment of Deleuze's temporal ideas. The problem is that with these subcompact particles, the geometry of that scalar space may actually become anti-scalar, and that is when the serotonin synapses do not point to dopamine as the string function of upstairs but of love, but actually it points in the opposite direction, because there are connections downwards from axons of dopamine into the synapses and reuptake. I think that's right, and it will essentially become non-equilibrium. Friston's ideas of free energy between the boundary and the brain is merely ADS CFT theory, and that only occurs, I believe, in the first type of Stiffel quadratic equation solutions. When we've got the other, then there's basically madness of different degrees, where the what you call Stokes theorems of Navier-Stokes criteria for perfect laminar fluid flow within a Nixon, or then right with the serotonin and dopamine are exchanged, if they're exchanged. That kind of breaks down, his whole theory breaks down, Markov blankets don't make sense. One forms holograms from the edge of the universe into the brain, we do not see the light either of electromagnetic light or light of God. In my brain we see holograms, messes of things outside, monsters, not very nice things. We see them, and the free energy Friston is said by Friston to minimise surprise of the outside world. There is nothing minimised and surprised in madness. So why does one person go mad and another person doesn't go mad in the same circumstances? It is merely the relationship between the two types of Stiffel quadratic equations. Those quadratic equations are born from the empty set essentially in the simplest of ways, inductively. And it is merely the empty set reducing itself as an idea in itself and nothing else. I do hope antagonistic and says do not murder each other in the smallest innermost of L. It wouldn't be very pleasant, I don't think. But they may be formed dissociative sex bodies, I think. And I think that is the next series of the overlapping cosmoses of product solutions when the two things are compared. And those two things will depend on what order one has diamonds and squares, and in fact not diamonds and not diamonds. It is interesting that the word diamond and square was used by Jensen, maybe because he had an old typewriter in the old days, and those are the two symbols he had, but diamonds and squares come in modal logic, and indeed in Hampkins' modal understanding of potentiality. Of course, their stuff is all very simple because they do not use graphic topologies over the higher mouse because of some reason they want to separate themselves from category theory when they can't. So there's like autofilters, taking them in stages, and category theory is like topology, things like that, formation, in many ways the Holy Spirit. But whether God is the natural numbers of various forms in his own process, inside those natural numbers are the factor octavians. It at least define the next stages, and White's theory of concrescence really states in the end everything is good. But not static, it still changes, there are still defects to repair, and those defects never end, I don't think, because diamond forcing creates more problems than diamonds within, and it never ends of the many oneness becoming the creativity in the wild cake of the universe, which is self-referential and contains itself but acts differently, and each part of God forming itself on a microcosm of its own self. And that ends, but the self itself is formed from these Quine-School foundation of elements, which merely added loops, basically loops into the incorrect time basis, which then form into versus operator algebras with various autofilters left and right, whatever they are, if they are formed without a subcompact. Well, that is it really, I think. I think that's about it. War needs to prove. Well, just using the higher order nice and the comparison lemmas. Comparison lemmas will at some stage become implicit when you have line states which refer to themselves, which are gravitation, time, anything like that. The whole idea of Newton's fixed forms of reference to mechanical gravitation is based upon local Minkowski diagrams, which are in fact all different. They're all different, and they're all in the minimization L in some ways. Internalization of L before photons are born. Before photons are born in the womb, the immaculate womb, Mary's womb, was that formed? Was that the smallest L, or was it the L of light in Victor's case, the L of light, or was it in fact the maximal? I think it was the Virgin Immaculate, without large cardinal, in the light of light, without autofilters expressed in itself yet, until Christ is born